Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Michelle Gauthier. She's a professional life coach who helps overwhelmed working moms create a more calm, organized life. And she is also a terrific podcast host. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of places in the world, people will benefit from what you will be talking about because you are talking about something very, very good. How to think differently to get better results in business and life, and how to take your life from chaos to calm. So, most of the time, my first question to you, Michelle, is a lot of times we see that we are overwhelmed with so many things, and
Yeah.
we think we have so much to do, and so less time in our hands. Why is this situation? Why is it? Is it because of more work we in hand, or is it because it's all in the mind and which is leading to so much of chaos?
I'd say some of both. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I think, though, in my personal story, the reason why I became a life coach was because I just got to the point where I was so stressed and overwhelmed all the time. And I wasn't able to have fun or be present or enjoy anything anymore. And when I look back on how I got there, and this is true for lots of my clients, we start out, out of school, getting a job, working really hard. We work harder, get promoted, and we just keep adding things to our life without ever really addressing, do I want to keep doing this? And do I have a good balance? Because then get promoted a few times, maybe you get married, have kids, then you have kids, then they have lots of things that you have to do. So life just keeps getting bigger and bigger with more and more responsibilities. And I think that adds to it. But I think the thing that for me personally really caused the biggest problem was the way that I was thinking about myself, that I had to be able to do all of these things. So as things just kept getting added, I had to be able to do them, not just do them, but do them to an A+ level, do them perfectly, present to everyone else that I was leading this perfect life and managing all these things. And it really wasn't true, but I didn't know how to think about it differently or let myself off the hook. I didn't even know that I was doing that. So sometimes I feel like we act from programming that we've gotten, throughout the course of our life without evaluating, do I want to be like this? Does this really work for me in my life?
Right, Michelle. So how does this work? Is this more for men, or is this more for women? Is there any study which indicates that this is impacting any particular gender much more than the other gender?
I think that I coach both men and women, and I think both of them feel it, but it seems to be in different ways. It seems to be that men feel this pressure to provide and to do well at work, and women have this pressure to do well at work, but also be able to successfully manage the home and the family. And I think now there's more partnership happening where people are sharing that more. But I think the traditional way of doing things is still really prominent. So I think we both feel that kind of stress. It might have different originations or different thoughts in our mind that's causing the stress for us.
Right, right. So is it more with working people and working couples, or is it also with people who are homemakers who are providing all the efforts to their home the best
Yep.
place? Many people decide to be homemakers in spite of being very highly educated, or also being, because a lot of people always talk about work life balance, and their ideal life is, oh, I don't want to do this, be a part of this corporate life anymore. I want to spend time with my children, with my family, just live a relaxed life. How does that work there?
Yeah. And I think I'll tell you in my experience. So I worked in the corporate world for about 20 years and I really enjoyed it and did well. And like I said, I got to the point where I just didn't want to do it anymore. I kind of lost all interest in it. So I decided that I was going to completely change my life, go back and study to become a life coach, start my own business, and create a life that was more balanced. I'm a single mom, and so I wanted to be able to spend more time with my kids, have a meaningful job, and just kind of have it all in terms of what I was thinking would really be a good life. So when I did that and I made that transition, what I found is that I just started to recreate the stress that I had in my corporate life by in within my own business. I felt like I needed to work all the time. I would work on weekends. I didn't even have that many clients. There was no reason for me to work that much when I was first getting started, but I was just so used to that working really hard, and I did not feel worthy or enough if I didn't have a lot of work and overwhelm in my life. So, your question about someone who quits the corporate world and decides to stay home, as long as they intentionally plan to have a different pace of life, a different life than they've had before, you have to change the way that you're looking at it, because otherwise you just recreate the patterns that you had before. I know and have coached lots of stay at home moms who feel just as overwhelmed as people who are working all day long. You can create that same thing no matter really what your circumstance is.
Right, right, Michelle. You were in the corporate world, you know about change management and process improvement. That's what you used to do a lot in your corporate life. But in terms of people, even if they don't know about change management and process improvement, the fact is that there are only 24 hours in a day. The fact is that a lot of people need to work. The fact is that we are born the way we are. There are some inherent traits that we are all grow with or develop it over a period of time. How do we deal with these issues? How do we sometimes, even a to-do list can become a problem, lead to overwhelm? I see it
Yes.
with myself. I've never been that sort of a person. Sometimes I keep things in a particular list, but when I try to do too many things, or put, at least even if I put too many things in that list, it becomes a problem. So all I do is just reduce it off, and I see two three things or just two three mails even on my inbox, rest go to some other inbox, some other place, then I feel much more comfortable with that. I don't want to, I'm not a tasker at all. One or two things at the same time is more than enough. How do people get this message? Where does this thing go wrong? Or is it about perfection, that some people want to be more perfectionist than others? Who is this perfection for? See, if you are a surgeon doing a surgery, that perfection can be understood, because that is somebody's life and death.
Yes.
But what about anything else? Is that much of perfection required? See, I mentioned several things at the same time, Michelle, but you are the master. I thought all these things are so interrelated. Why not ask you together so that you can answer them at your own pace?
Yeah, and I think your example of saying, I don't like when my to-do list has too many things. It makes me feel overwhelmed. So I reduce it and I send certain emails to a different box so that I'm just handling two or three at a time. I give you an A plus on that solution. So the way that you probably got there was by stopping and noticing some things about yourself. And you just told me several things about yourself with that solution, which is I am not a multitasker. So just the fact that you know that about yourself and that you know what makes you feel overwhelmed, you're already winning that battle. So you've already done the first step. And I think in order to come up with a solution, if the problem is I feel overwhelmed and I've got too much to do, in order to come up with a solution, we first have to stop and really understand the problem. So in the example that you were talking about, maybe you had a to-do list that was too long, and I'm supposing here, so please tell me if I'm wrong, but you had a to-do list that was too long. It made you feel overwhelmed. You notice that when you feel overwhelmed, you can't think clearly. And when you can't think clearly, you can't do any of the things on that list. Does that feel I mean, is that how it worked for you? Did you notice when you felt overwhelmed that you couldn't do things as
Yes, yes,
easily?
yes. It does not work like this, because I, since quite sometimes earlier on, I have a diary which has a lot of things, but it has only the list of very, very important things. Rest, if the email list becomes long or the number of tasks become long, then you do those tasks, but you prioritize it. You can only do two, three things or two things, big ones in one particular day. Rest,
Yes.
you put it out of your eyes. You put it either in a snoozed format, let them go to sleep, let them come up only at a particular hour, or put it in another box so that you are able to, you only see what you need to do. And only
Yes.
when you do that, it is, even for newsletters, I see several newsletters coming into my inbox. I am tempted to read them because they are so good sometimes, but you
Yes.
need to focus on the work at hand. So you again put it somewhere in the reading list so that it
Yes.
stays there till you are free, and you are putting only putting all your focus in just reading those things so that you can get the best value out of those emails.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so I think your example of thinking of yourself as I'm not a multitasker instead of I need to do all these things, I have to finish all of these things really makes you so much more successful. So when you were assessing your problem, you thought, what is the problem and what do I know about myself? And I think that's really the first thing to start. Some people love a to do list that has absolutely everything on it. They feel calm knowing that it's all written down. So it's just depends on the person, but it's so good to know what works for you. One tip that I give people when they're thinking about their schedule in general, I don't know if you see this a lot, but what I definitely see is that people are afraid to say no. And sometimes they don't even think about if they want to do something or not. They just say yes if someone asks them to do something. So, a little trick that I teach my clients is to use something called the love and fit test. So, you ask two questions. If someone proposes something to you, one is, do I love this? Not do I like it or could I stand it, but do I love this idea? And then number two is, does it fit? And I don't mean does it fit in your calendar, because sometimes you might have white space in your calendar, but does it fit into the kind of life that you're trying to create? So, an example for me is I am trying to create continually because I don't think we get to a point where we have work life balance. I feel like it's just an everyday, you just manage your work life balance. So, I'm continually making decisions in order to create a balanced life for myself and my family. So, that's the question that I would ask myself. So, for example, I was picking my daughter up from school and I had arranged my own schedule so that I could pick her up from school because it ends before the traditional workday would end. And someone else asked me, could you pick up my child and bring her to your house and keep her at your house until I finish work? So I asked myself, do I love this? I didn't love it because I had gone to a lot of effort to be able to spend time with my daughter. And then did it fit? It didn't fit into the lifestyle I was trying to create, because what I was trying to do was be able to pick up my daughter, have that conversation with her on the way home. There's that magic time where your kids will tell you about their day and then they just stop talking about it. So it was a no and a no for me. And so then I just said, no, I can't do that. And that's another area where people get tripped up. I can talk about that later if you want to. A lot of people struggle with saying no. And then sometimes you might have something that's just a yes. For example, when you asked me to be on this program and I looked at it and I thought, wow, that looks great. I love the idea. Does it fit into the life that I'm trying to create? Yes, it does. Because part of the life I'm trying to create is sharing these things with other people. So it was an easy yes. I did the quick test. I said, yep, that sounds good to me. So that's a good way to decide what actually gets on your calendar. And I think being very vigilant about what you allow to take up your time is probably the biggest way to change your life.
Right, right, Michelle. But what about perfection? How do you change that concept of perfection that one builds for themselves?
Yeah.
Is it that they need to dilute it further? Can they be always like that? What is this perfection thing? Because
Yeah.
I have never believed in this. As I said, a surgeon needs to be perfect. They need to try to be perfect because it's about somebody's life at that point in time. But what about the other work that we continuously doing day in and day out? How do you
Yeah.
look at this word called perfection?
So the first thing I do is try to dig into what the root of that perfectionism is and where that came from. Studies vary on this, but the general idea is that between the time that we're born and the time that we're between 3 and 11 years old, we get all of these messages from our family and how we grew up. And then we sort of start operating from there. So imagine like the computer is getting coded up to age 11 at the most. And then we just start operating from there. So there's something that happens in that time, and it's nothing necessarily that our parents have done wrong. But in my example, I'll just share my own personal example. I'm the oldest child. I realized at some point in my youth that when I did a good job and did well at school and people liked me, that felt good. So then I kept trying to recreate that feeling of getting an A plus, getting a promotion, being the mom who could have two kids and also have this great career. And I never really stopped to think, do I want that? Does that really, give me the life that I'm looking for? So the first is like, where did it come from? And when you investigate that, do so without judgment. We're not trying to blame anyone. We're just looking into where this pattern could have been created and then asking yourself, do I want to operate from here? And then I think just being able to realize within yourself that we're trying to work so hard to be perfect. No one's ever perfect. And you are already enough and already perfect without all that stuff. And so when you can understand where it came from, understand that you're already enough, and then think about some areas in your life. And this is where the rubber meets the road. And sometimes people think, how can I possibly do that? But I encourage my clients to choose places in their life where they do B minus work. Right. So there's got to be somewhere like that surgeon you're talking about. Yes, they have to be super focused when they're doing surgery, but when she gets home at night, can she just not make dinner and feel fine about ordering takeout? Like there's
Absolutely.
somewhere in your life where you can do B minus work. And so I have my clients practice doing that and just see how that feels. And usually they feel a lot of relief taking that pressure off themselves. And then when you have that good feedback to yourself to say, oh my gosh, that felt good, I feel more relaxed, then you're more likely to try that B minus work other places and just see how that feels. And eventually, I'll speak for myself. Eventually, I have transitioned. I'm definitely not a perfectionist anymore. It still comes up for me, but I will tell myself the truth, which is I'm already enough. And part of my being a perfectionist was that I wanted people to think like I would want you to look at me and think, "Oh my gosh, she's so perfect. She's so smart. She's so whatever." And now what I realize is people who aren't perfect are much more real and interesting, and you can have a true connection with them. So I always think I just want to be my authentic self, and my authentic self isn't perfect.
Right, right. Now let's talk about the business part. A lot of, especially women in business, either in workplaces, or a lot of them are entrepreneurs, and
Mhm.
several of them, again, that perfection thing comes in. That, okay, I need to prove to the world, and that I can be equally good like men. Some of them, they tend to get, or even for men, it becomes like I need to prove it to the world, and then that pressure gets onto your head. How do you balance that perfection thing in terms of the business part that you, a business role that you have to fulfill,
Mhm.
and as well as, as a homemaker, or as somebody who has to manage the home? How do you manage these two things? Where is it that you can give relaxation to yourself and not
Yes.
try to be, where is it? Because somewhere, as you said, as again we talked about the surgeon, that surgery needs focus, but you can be yourself. You cannot make dinner, and you can order from outside or take away,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yes, exactly. And that definitely takes practice. Another thing about perfectionism, though, when I think about women starting businesses, most of the people who I work with who start businesses wouldn't start the business if they stayed in their perfectionism because you can't. You're so afraid to make a mistake and you're so afraid to move forward. And I also would see this in the corporate world holding people back. So the person who was the biggest perfectionist was not the person with the highest position. They are holding themselves back because they're afraid to make a mistake and they are afraid to be imperfect in any way, and that will definitely keep you stuck. So as an entrepreneur, I think one of the things I had to work through and that I coach people on is just the idea that what does it mean to fail? And can we change the meaning of that to I learned something? And the more I fail, the more I will succeed. Okay, that didn't work. Let's cross that one off. That didn't work. Let's cross that one off. Oh, this one did work. Okay, we'll keep doing that. So you have to have that flexible ability to just try and allow for failure. And when I help my clients plan ahead of time, just there will be things you'll do that you'll fail. So let's talk about how you feel when that happens. Let's talk about what you want to make that mean. And let's talk about what your next steps will be when that happens. And that seems to really help people at least be able to put one foot in front of the other and make little steps forward.
Right, right. Now let's come to the happiness part. A
Okay.
lot of people have everything from almost a perfect life if you see it from the eyes of others. But when they see themselves, they don't find reasons to be happy, or maybe they don't feel it that way. But they see a picture of a friend on Instagram or any other, and they are instead of happy for being happy for themselves, they are worried about, like, they are so happy, I am not so happy. What is this about happiness? One is that you have less, you are happy or less happy, and you want to do more for yourself as well as family, so that you can be much more happier.
Yeah.
But in case of when you already have everything, what is it that you don't feel that happy feeling within you? How
Yeah.
does that work? How can you bring that aspect to yourself, push that idea into yourself that there is enough happiness in your life? You just need to get that feeling from within.
Yes, yes. And I think anytime someone is saying, well, I'm not happy now, but I'll be happy when, it doesn't even matter what the when is, they're not going to be happy because people who say, I'll be happy when I make X amount of money, then they make $1 million and they're not happy. I'll be happy when I make $2 million. Anytime you're putting your happiness out based on when something happens, you're not going to be happy. And so, what I encourage people to think is you can be happy right now today with exactly what you have. And you can do that by focusing not on what someone else is doing on Instagram, but on focusing on the things that you have that you love in your life. And I think people get caught in that trap. And that's exactly what happened to me too, is I got to the point where I had everything. I had the job, I had the kids, I had the house, everything that I was striving for my whole life. And I got there and thought, okay, this is it. This doesn't even feel good. I don't even want this. And so I think being able to ask yourself and just readjust and say, okay, I thought this was the path to happiness, but I was wrong. What is the path to happiness? And in my experience, when I work with my clients on this, it's always more about feeling calm, balanced, present with their family, having gratitude for the little things. And so putting practices into your life that can help you do that will bring happiness now.
Happiness now. And so what does this state of calm look like, in spite of having a very hectic schedule, in spite of being doing so many other things in your day-to-day life, work, home, children? You still can be in a state of calm. What is this state of calm all about? How does this feel? Can you help us understand this particular state of mind or state that one wants to be in?
Yes, yes. I think it's mostly the separation of the circumstances of your life. So, for example, you have a job and you have 10 meetings today or whatever it is, and you have two kids and they have soccer practice after school, whatever it is. So, there's the things in your life. And then there's the way that you're thinking about them, and that creates the way that you feel. So, for example, if I wake up in the morning and the very first thing I think is, oh my gosh, I'm already exhausted. I have so many things to do today. I'm never, ever going to get them done. I immediately feel stressed and overwhelmed. If you can train your brain, and doing a morning routine is also really helpful. I feel very strongly that the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning sets the tone for your day. So doing a morning routine is very helpful. I can talk more about that in a minute. But if instead of that, you look at that calendar and you say, okay, lots of things on the calendar today. I am going to remain calm. I feel good about it. I'm going to do the first thing first. it's very unlikely I'm going to get all these done in one day. So if I don't, that's okay. I'm going to move them to tomorrow. Just looking at the same thing in a completely different way. People will say to me all the time, how is it possible that you're a single mom who owns a business and you're always so calm? Because the calm is coming from me creating my own thoughts and creating this balanced life and making little choices at every step of the day. I'm choosing that.
Absolutely, making the right kind of day for yourself, and that's, I guess, the trick. There is so much to talk and learn from you about this, Michelle, and I guess this is just one podcast show, but you are yourself a podcast host. You have a great podcast show to tell people how can people listen more from you about all these things. What is that podcast about? How can people do that? Secondly, tell us about your professional life coach work. How can people connect with you there and professionally become your client, be professionally engaged with you?
Okay, perfect. My podcast is called Overwhelmed Working Woman. It's everywhere you listen to podcasts. And my goal, they drop on Monday mornings. My goal is to have a 12 to 20-minute episode that people can listen to as they're getting ready for their week that has one great concept and a tip that you can use to make your week better. So it's very actionable. Here's what we're talking about this week. For example, saying no, creating boundaries, how to think differently. And if you go and listen, you'll have a better week. They have a little tip to have a better week. And then professionally speaking, I work with my clients one-on-one. I see all my clients on Zoom so I can see people from everywhere. And to find out more about that, you can go to my website, which is michellegauthier.com.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in a nutshell, this is my last way. In a nutshell, if you want to live one tip, how you can come, not be overwhelmed, live a life of calm, how do you do that? What is the one thing that one can do?
One thing I would say the first thing that you can do is look at why you're not there now. Like, what are the decisions that you're making? So, even if you looked at your calendar, go back and look at this week and look at your calendar and say, why do I not feel calm now? And I would suspect that there are probably places where you could have said no, where you said things out of guilt, where you don't have boundaries, but really just understanding and taking responsibility for the fact that if you feel overwhelmed, it's your own thoughts and your own actions that are creating it. And the great thing about that, sometimes when people get that, they get mad, like, oh, so I made this mess for myself, because we like to say, well, my work made me feel this way, or my husband made me feel this way. But the good thing about knowing you created it yourself is that you can change it too. It's the power is all within you to create the kind of life that you want to have.
Perfect, perfect. Ask why, and you will get the answer. Just
Yes.
like all great answers come from great questions. We as podcast hosts, that is what we can ask. We ask
Yes.
questions, we get the good answers from the guests. In the same way, if we ask the right sort of questions to ourselves, we will get the best answers to live our life, which
It's
we can
true.
lead without overwhelm and be in a calm state of mind. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.